Heidegger, 1943, Parmenides lecture. So we're looking at already the Lawrence Hemming classical thinking group on this. They came out with their first talk on it on the 15th. So not sure how long it will be until the next one, but there's plenty to discuss already. So this presentation I'll treat with some questions that cathect, as it were, around the general questions they're raising out of the introduction segment of the Parmenides seminar. And so let's revisit the Monty Hall problem and bring that into contact on the question of Wissenschaft denkt nicht, or science doesn't think. How can we... So I guess we have to ask, is there any cogency to, for instance, the question, what is space, under the notion that STEM research or Wissenschaft cannot ask this question because its tools are not the kind of tools that could inquire into this. So Abraham Lincoln has said in an anecdote given in a talk, one will have heard this in different versions, but that wise men in the East were asked to make a lapidary statement for a Eastern potentate, and they came back with the phrase, everything decays and vanishes. We have also, of course, the King Solomon's Ring version, this too shall pass. But then Lincoln said there's the one thing that could resist this, possibly, in potentia, as it were. And this is supposed to be the innermost core of the human character. So, and I would link that up to the etho-poetic practice. But I think we have in our intuition in the technological age is perhaps to immediately think of character in terms of what does it do, how do they behave, in terms of behavior. Heidegger says of a translation, the problem with mere linking a word to a word, even if this word is the same word, so Offenlichkeit or openness, transparency, publicness, let's say, Offenlichkeit, but has somehow the word open in it, said by a German in the time of, let's say, Jakob Burckhardt, who Heidegger said is a thinker of history, not just a historian. Like, should I say something bad or should I not say something bad? I feel the urge to I don't know, should we follow the rule, if one can't say anything good, don't say anything at all? Does Heidegger do that? Heidegger Dulphine is the model, but I don't know if I could accept Heidegger Dulphine as the ultimate model. But it's a good question. What I wanted to say, and I suppose I will say it, is there's quite a few, that's easy enough to say, there's quite a few really bad people that are called historians, and some of them are have a lot of airspace, like this guy Neil Ferguson, the Scottish guy. I think he's pretty second rate, and apparently he's been knighted. So I don't know, this kind of circuit where the reason I feel compelled to mention that is because again and again on YouTube they feed you this shit. Like again and again they feed you people that are just second rate and basically hacks for the let's just say it this way because it's the most cogent way to say it, I think, is for the still to use Eisenhower's phrase, although I'd like to modify it, not the sort of industrial sort of the cybernetic accelerated military state apparatus. And this means, so let's say what this means for a second. Let's think about it this way. There was science being done by people like Eddington and people, the guy that, the guy that isolated the nucleus of the atom, and by people like Brown, who thematized the Brownian motion, which I think is sort of like Lucretian motion, but he gave it a scientific meaning by saying the reason these flecks dance around like this, these particulate matter in the water move as they do must be because there's smaller material pushing them on either side, and then you could make a kind of grid and then use that as an objectivity to say this on this side that, and every time one moves we'll sort of fill in something here, and then we'll take inferences, we'll build up through inference like that, and we'll make a model and we'll try to see if it can have any predictive power. Isn't this the same? So yeah, at that time there was a change happening. There was one science for the sake of simply scientists like Eddington get interested and want to say something about the atomic nucleus, but Eddington himself died saying nothing will come of this. But of course, great things came of that: nuclear power, nuclear weapons. And these projects, which are deliberately and ahead of time aimed at military applications primarily. So since World War II, first nylon, general application, making ropes, making hammocks and ships, all kinds of stuff. That impressed the military, and then plutonium was isolated, and then they said, well, maybe we could do plutonium. So this answers Fukuyama in a way. The military can do what Fukuyama is acting as though it can't do with AI, which is that what it did is it didn't say, I'm just going to theorize and build a model, because it didn't actually know how to build an atomic bomb yet. It said, we'll do the model building and the engineering at the same time. So they were already building stuff and fidgeting around and trying new things in the old way of inventor. So like the way that was sort of prevalent up to World War I was the inventor's way more than the scientific way, sort of bricoleurs, gadget man sort of way that was inspired by people that invented the telephone and this kind of thing, and perfected the light bulb and all that kind of stuff. But after World War II, of course, the Manhattan Project was also in University of Chicago and UC Berkeley. There's a metallurgy department, was apparently very good in Chicago. Maybe it still is. They simultaneously did theorizing and the other side of it. So like today, there's all this talk about the hands-on with the drone warfare, and that these advances with drones only happened because they were actually using it and people were looking at it and being inventive and so on. So what Fukuyama assumes that the computer, the AI, would only be the one that makes the blueprint, and therefore it couldn't be that effective. That's so I don't understand how he could even think that. It doesn't make any sense. No, the AI is totally going to be connected to other projects, and the military is going to use it to continue its project of some kind of harnessing of all the Earth's powers for the sake of something unknown. That's it. I guess that would be the point where the thinking comes in, the question of thinking comes in, because what is the Western order exactly? And then the question of thinking comes in, but it doesn't come in at the level of the technical problems here. But let's look at this. So assuming that to be the case, and then assuming that education follows that, let me try to look at a very modest example through the Monty Hall problem of what it means that we're breeding ourselves in a different way, so that it reaches down. It's as though it reaches past the technical threshold into zombieism, into what Plato would have called the Sukarion, or the shrunken soul, the mere reactive memory, or how should one say that, philosophically speaking, this is called intuition, which doesn't mean the American usage, which is somehow tied to the notion of women's intuition. But intuition in the perennial usage, as it were. There's no perennial usage, but intuition in the sense of philosophy means seeing the whole rather than an isolated part without a specific meaning. It corresponds to nous, the idea of nous, and the idea of identity, which is of course important for any logic, and then therefore any logical inference. It sort of lies, as it were, back behind. This theory of intuition lies back behind any scientific equipment or experimental equipment. And so, in the Monty Hall problem, it suggested that everyone's intuition was wrong about the Monty Hall problem, except that woman Savant, I mean, her name is actually Savant, funnily enough, who's supposedly got the highest score on some IQ test. And I can readily see what they mean by that. She's very sharp on a certain profile, on the sense of she knows what makes sense. It's like most people, you talk to them and they're just like they're unable to judge correctly, as Nietzsche says. Some people, like Nietzsche, could judge correctly, and it's fairly objective. So this lady, it's not just that she's able to judge correctly, but she does it rather rapidly, I think, more rapidly than most thinkers, probably more rapidly than Nietzsche. I don't know that doing it more rapidly than myself, I would say. She comes to correct conclusions rather rapidly, I feel like. And then you could see your ability to judge is correct, especially if it was something like a question like that has a sort of rules to it, or which involves some kind of comprehension of a like reading comprehension or of grammar or something. But I mean, for example, let's look at the Monty Hall problem itself. So the issue, everybody gets it wrong, because what happens is there's supposedly 3 doors. You take a choice hoping to get the door with the prize behind it. You say, I want door number 1, and then the false door with the goat, which is meant to be something bad, behind it. is opened, and then you're asked, do you want to change? So now you're faced with the one you chose and a door that's a mystery. And supposedly everyone's intuition is, okay, it's a 50-50 choice, it doesn't matter. And then people wrote in and said, the savant lady, she's poisoning the public with their nonsense. There's already enough people that are math illiterate. Why is she claiming that it actually makes a difference to change the thing? And the reason we could see readily if we do the following. So let's do the following experiment and actually change. So the answer, just from a mechanical point of view, is that the first choice is a 1 of 3 choice, and now you have a 1 of 2 choice, 50-50, and a 50-50 choice is better than a 33.333, 1 out of 3 choice. Your original choice of the 3 doors, 1 out of 3. When you're asked if you want to stay with it or change, 1 out of 2. That we could understand just by saying, oh yeah, it's more. But we don't really, it's not direct. It's not our intuition. But my point is, don't we actually train ourselves through early education to what our intuition is? That's the whole point in, I think, Piaget. Things that we think are natural are very much more open, especially regarding spatial sensibility, regarding topology, are much more open to small children who are growing into being or thinking. And here, so now let me give you the version that shows the intuition behind the Monty Hall problem, in order to say this is something that Heidegger. So I don't know like exactly how to fit this in with Heidegger, but I'm just kind of thinking here. This seems to be something that stands back behind what scientific experiments can do. Now you could always say something corresponds to that in the subatomic neuronal structure or something like that. I understand that, but nonetheless, I think it has a sense of regarding it as, I mean, the only way, if you say you actually had control of that brain, and then you could say, make this brain immediate, like you were teaching somebody something without them actually learning it through manipulating the brain in some Ray Kurzweil way. Say you actually changed it, how would you know which state that you wanted? How would you know which intuition you wanted? You'd have to actually have had it and then say, preferred this one. But why? But let me show you why it makes sense to say we could actually change intuition instead of just saying 50-50 is better than 1/3, or we should say 1/2 is better than 1/3, as in terms of giving us a better chance of getting it right. Obviously, that's not actually true in one sense. So it's not actually true in the sense of you're not running if it's not really an experiment and you're not really running it over and over and over again, then it's not true. This is why probably I think the economy within the next 12 months will suffer some major depression, worse than the first depression, and then the ICE will be vastly ramped up, and then the military, which is the only thing being funded, will continue to be funded. I think it's because, Trump himself is a factor in the economy that's none of the current modeling can handle. So then that's the problem with all this type of probability thinking, which is which of course is so dominating of all our thinking, because precisely I would say because since World War II STEM has been more and more pushed because it's supposed to have military applications on the model of the nylon and the plutonium and the nuclear weapons, and the Manhattan Project, basically. And then, of course, the internet, DARPA, and all this stuff is cropping up according to the same pattern. And this is the main acceleration of this is the main activity of the Earth and all its people. So I mean, not every individual, but just somehow as a whole. It's in a way a very questionable claim. It sort of relies on it's sort of a questionable empirical claim, but it also seems to seep into our being. But okay, here, let's go to the example of the how you can show yourself intuitionally that the Monty Hall problem should be solved in this way it's known as conservation of information and transmitting it over to the next iteration. But let's just see it more directly. So say somebody were to put before you 20 doors, say there's a quarter on each of them, American money quarter on each of them, and underneath the quarter you could lift it up and see whether it's the prize or not. Now you're asked to choose one of 20, but picture it. You have to picture it to yourself. You're asked to choose one of 20, and then not one goat is removed, but 18 goats are removed. Now can't you see that you have a better chance to, can't you just see intuitionally that you have a better chance if you switch? Because you made a choice 1 in 20, but now you have a choice 1 in 2. And it's probably that other one. Now it could be the one you have. So this is the problem but then look at what's happening. Here's what's happening. We prime our intuition differently. That breeds into the next generation. And then one could say we only really become a thinking being, when we grow into education. But then we'd have this other intuition, so that nobody would have written in and said Savant was giving them the wrong information on this question, because everybody would naturally say, oh yeah, that's common sense. I mean, if they're a Trumper and they like to talk about common sense and they're totally idiotic, yes, they'd say it's common sense. But if they had if they were at all informed, then they would realize what we take to be intuitional is something we've grown into, and different people and different races have different intuitions. I mean, in the sense of genus, Tacitus used the word genus to say that the genus of Pompeii Herculaneum was destroyed by the volcano in 79 AD. The race of Pompeii Herculaneum, just as the race of the Carthaginians was destroyed from the face of the earth, made a desert and called it peace. The famous quote from Tacitus. But that's not, I mean, it's funny. So it's like, I can't help but say, it's like, why do we have these specific moments in classical literature stand out, and then one has this sort of experience. If one were alive a little while before Wikipedia and had read a lot of books, then you look on Wikipedia and suddenly all the things that stood out to you when you're reading, thinking you're like reading on your own, often it's the same thing. It's the same phrases, the same pathos. So I mean, sometimes the ancient authors deliberately gear towards pathos. Then I think they do it in a way that's we're not used to in the modern media situation, where so much is about presentation and everything is about like somehow being more attractive, richer, more successful, boasting. Everything is about this comical society of boasting, which is sort of has Trump at the top of it, which is so repulsive and disgusting to the rest of to Islam, I think, especially because they don't believe in boasting. They believe in something more like humbleness, and that the leader would just be chosen because people would recognize this as the leader, not because they're boasting about their CV or something. So, yeah, if intuition can be changed at that level, it's interesting. I mean, I feel like just the showing this difference between the level of the experiment. So you could run an experiment and then say, here's the three, do the Monty Hall problem yourself, and then sort of run it like a card game or whatever, like that 21 film with Kevin Spacey. But that takes us into the realm of science. That's the interesting thing. It's you notice how there's this hinge point, axis, where the direct intuition is hinged right against the way we're doing science. And then if everybody had that intuition, then this whole Monty Hall problem would have never become topical, because it would just never been noticed. I think this brings us into some contact with what Heidegger's worried about with language that everybody else overlooks. Not everybody else, not Wittgenstein, not Schleiermacher, not people that really have given a lot of thought to this Hegelian idea of the different Zeitalter, or different zeitgeists. But most people don't take that very seriously, and they say instead existentialism, oh, I don't know who I am, I don't know where I am, ha ha ha. So we're trying to, at the beginning of this Parmenides and Hemming series, try to show sort of that there is a ground here that deserves to be called this existentialist consciousness. And yeah, so the intuition about what to do in the Monty Hall problem is an example of something which is immediately adjacent to actual experimentation, but shows that there's this range that steps just behind the realm where we could talk about what is proper logical inference, there's something that has to stand behind all the points would give the orientation to any econometrics or any quantity fund, for instance. And then if it's screwed up at this level of one step back of the direct intuition by Trump, because all the action or energy is with the executive in the American system, and so one person can change that much, then the whole economy comes under attack by this. But again, we're not really trying to prophesize about the situation so much as the main purpose here is just to locate this type of area where, language, if the same word would speak differently if you had intuition 1 as intuition 2, right?